Hi, I'm Margie Holmes, psychologist, author, and educator. Before anything else, let me greet our friends from the US a belated Happy Thanksgiving. For today's episode, I'll answer your questions on cybersex. Our discussion on cybersex will be limited to the experience between couples. While I realize that the younger ones are very much in the know about this topic, for our purposes today, let me clarify what cybersex is. You know, for people like me and my husband, etc. Okay? For the purposes of our show, cybersex are or is sexual acts between people mediated by internet or web technology. Now, we had to be very, very clear with this, especially because of the cybercrime law. Nakakatakot, hindi natin alam anong mangyari if we expand the subject. Although I hope in time we can do that. Okay? So, some of you ask, can cybersex be considered sex? In my experience, both personal and clinical, yes, definitely. Because hindi ba ang sex naman hindi lang intercourse? After all, if you say intercourse, that cuts off, a huge population of homosexuals. Because while they may have wonderful sex, intercourse is very narrowly defined as a penis in a vagina. Hindi ba ang dami-dami namang masarap? It doesn't have to be even anal sex, which can be a lot of fun, or oral sex. It can be nipple tweaking, blah, blah, blah. Hindi ba? So, definitely cybersex, even if it's virtual, meaning walang actual touching, is sex. And I wanted to make this important or underscore it, because later we are going to talk about fidelity and what the implications are between having, in quotes, mere cybersex vis-a-vis infidelity. Okay? So, this week I tweeted this question. Is cybersex a good option for couples living away from each other? And does it help the relationship? Here are some of your comments and reactions. First of all, I am so happy that we have both positive and negative comments about cybersex within the context of a good relationship, because this is where discussion happens, no? Which is always good. Okay, at Webstalker says, cybersex is not a good option. It's driving me even crazier. So, Webstalker, una gusto kong sabihin, ikaw naman, no? Kahit nang horny ka, which it seems that you are, which is also a good thing, surely naman anyone who is imaginative enough and techno-savvy enough to do cybersex can think of other ways para the horniness, hopefully, can be, dealt with, up to the point of culmination, consummation, kahit na mag-isa ka, right? I mean, there's masturbation, there's other things, no? At least this is my view. For the others, not only Webstalker, who may stay with your belief, which is just fine, but for the others who might be worried that, naku, baka hindi ko ma-handle if I have cybersex with my wife or husband, okay? Because both at RG and Sungkilaw have never tried it before, and these are their comments. Baka lalong ma-homesick, which is just like a little bit what Webstalker said, na parang may negative response, no? And at Urge pa, sinabi, never tried. My wife is in Singapore. Do you recommend? Okay? In my clinical experience, absolutely. Right? I recommend it because it is something new, but more important, it is an option where both of you can be closer, where both of you are trying an experience together, even though you're far apart. And just in case you find out that cybersex is either not for the two of you or not for one of you, so hindi mo naman siya pwedeng i-force, no? Even if you find out it doesn't work, at least you tried it. And what lovelier time is it to try something except with someone you trust and you love? Okay? And it is true, Sungkilaw, you might get homesick. But minsan, being homesick is not so bad. For one thing, you get to appreciate more what you have back home. Alam ko mahirap, pero maybe if you put it in this context, it is okay. At iniisip ko lang, kahit na homesick ka, lalo na malapit ang Pasko, hindi ba? So lahat ng nakikita mo, mas masakit kasi you would like to experience this with your husband or with your spouse, no? Minsan, hindi ba kahit na parang malungkot lahat, through cybersex, perhaps you can create an oasis, of love and complete engagement with another person. Even kung kahit na tumigil kayo, naku, parang the desert of non-engagement and feeling so lonely because everyone is so far away. Okay, so now let's hear the stories of two wives.
In our case, it helped a lot. He lived in Manila for a couple of months while I was in Bacolod. It somehow made us more open to each other, less timid when actually having sex, and for me personally, it gave me a bit more confidence. I mean, who would actually find me sexy on cam?
Okay, in addition to your husband, I can't help feeling that many others would have found you sexy. Although I presume na hindi ka naman nagpakita sa iba, no? Okay, Mrs. Virtual says,
My husband and I have done cybersex first before we actually met and got de-virginized.
and let me just add, even though you haven't finished, I'm sorry, let me just interrupt and say, I think it is wonderful na pareho kayong na-divergenize with each other. No, it is not something that often happens, but when it does, great. Okay? Not that it isn't great if one of you was divergenized first and the other wasn't. But as you can see, there is so much fun in diversity. Okay?
I believe it's a wonderful way of discovering yourself. When I show him my private parts and vice versa, it's really ecstatic. It's like three-dimensional ecstasy. These secret moments and guilty pleasure makes our relationship more exciting. And the fact that we have to compensate our physical absence and meet online makes us discuss more facts about us. We are happily married now.
Thank you so much for sharing what you have. As a response, let me first quote Norman Yambao, who says, yes, cybersex helps. It's a different pleasure when you know that your partner's getting pleasure as well when you both do it on the web while watching each other. It's a different form of appreciation. Correct ka dyan, Norman, and Sungkilaw, and Urge pa. Correct kayo because remember, sex is not merely actually doing it. Sex is visual, and it is wonderful if in addition to actually being able to do it with you, you can still have options, you can still do things that are sexy even if you're far apart. And of course, cybersex has to do with what is visual, it has to do with what is verbal, and verbal are not necessarily words, it can be moans and groans, no? I would, make some, kaya lang baka hindi sexy sa iba. Okay? So, let me go further to say, Nico Balatbat has this to say, I think it doesn't help. What if the man or woman still has libido after the deed? Will he or she also be allowed to have cybersex with another man or woman given the fact that technically he or she did not cheat? Wouldn't that induce thoughts of infidelity? Nico, in the sense that it might induce thoughts of infidelity, I agree with you 100%. But isn't part of love feeling tempted and yet not doing anything about it because you don't want to hurt your partner? Or ideally, although I have found this very, very seldom happens, you are so in love with your spouse or your partner that hindi ka nasasexihan sa ibang tao. But as I say, this is very difficult, no? So don't be hurt if your partner doesn't feel this way. So Nico, totoo yan. But as I say, just because we're tempted, it doesn't mean we have to do it. Okay? And some people would consider doing it with someone else technically sex. So if you do cybersex or actually have sex with someone else, unfaithful ka na. Because as you know, with infidelity, it doesn't only have to do with actual intercourse or even sexual acts. There is such a thing as emotional infidelity, which many of us feel. Okay? So, Maria Pimentel shares, if both partners agree with it, then it could be beneficial. But if the other feels obliged and is not willing, then that's a different story. I think the sex life of a married couple permits anything. You can do whatever you want for as long as both parties agree with it. Naku, correct ka dyan. No, in my experience, as a sexual counselor, and with people who email me, I get a lot of letters, a lot of emails from wives of OFWs. And they say, naku, doktora, what will I do? My husband wants me to have sex with him on cam, or my husband wants me to have sex on the phone. Hindi ako sanay. No? Now, again, I say, do not force yourself if you don't want to do it. But if you're just thinking of the possibility at siguro nag-aalangan ka lang because you're not sure you'll do it well, etc., etc., then why don't you give it a chance? As I say, don't force yourself, but give it a chance. In a way, your husband is asking you to help him become faithful even though you're far apart. You know, try it. Try it once, twice. Kung hindi mo pa-type, then wag na. But kung ka-type mo, why not? Okay? Now, I wish to thank Sam Siat from the bottom of my heart for giving us some tips on getting the most out of cybersex. Particularly, very high-tech kasi si Sam, it seems like, so particularly when it has to do with the webcam, no? Okay, number one, consider the quality of the technology involved in your act of virtual communication. Practice, practice, practice. You know, you can practice with yourself and look at it afterwards. Maybe you can practice with your BFF, but I don't know if your spouse or partner will be jealous. Baka wag na lang siguro. Okay? But it is good to practice. Why not? After all, you are practicing for something that's worthwhile, which is to make sex better for your partner and sana also for yourself, di ba? Okay. So, Sam, number two. Unlike live sex, cybersex attains a fantasy aspect and bad angles could ruin the experience. Correct ka dyan, no? The goodies will be up close and vivid, more so in high-definition screens, so try to do it that way. Way to go, Sam. Thank you for sharing tips so that our minds are open and we don't feel guilty about it. But I asked Sam if he could sana be more specific. And he did. I love you, Sam. Okay, number one. Check your camera, microphone, and most of all, assure your privacy to guarantee a satisfactory experience. Because if you're worried that someone else might see or hear, syempre, you cannot get fully into the act. Okay? Lighting is key. Avoid overhead light sources, especially the fluorescent kind. Okay? Baka kung meron kang kaibigan na may mga light sa studio, I don't know kung parang favor you can ask them. Meet nga, I will ask Rappler.com. Joke only, ha? Joke only. Okay. If you are used to having sex in the dark, cybersex is not for you. And yet, why don't you try it? Because, you know, cybersex may open up experiences in self-confidence. That is very true. You know, you won't know if you don't try things. Now, remember that you are the master of your camera, your lens, so zoom in and out to your delight, no? I know some women, you know, who put lipstick on their nipples. Minsan nakaka-cute because the contrast is so high, which they say is one of the functions of pubic hair. But I know we're digressing, so balik tayo, no? Upshot angles are sexy. Overhead shots look pervy, okay? And remember that sex is messy. So don't be too upset when, you know, things happen, right? Like you have to land on a, what do you call it? On that wet spot, etc., etc. Because even though sex is messy, it is also fun. And sometimes, hindi ba, the messier it is, the more fun it is. So if you choose to engage in cybersex, be ready to see all of your bits and pieces in their high-definition glory. Naku Sam, wala akong masabi. I bow to your greater experience and tech savvy. And thank you, thank you, thank you, Sam. And thank you to all of you who have written me on Facebook and written Rappler on Facebook. Thank you to all of you for making this show, such an exciting show, or at least I like to think it was. Okay? Next week, I'll answer questions on online dating. Please send me your questions and comments on Facebook, tweet using the hashtag AskMargie, or send an email to askmargie@rappler.com. See you next week.